When you think of King Solomon, you probably picture a golden age, right? Unbelievable wisdom, staggering wealth, and that magnificent temple in Jerusalem. It's the ultimate success story. But what if all that glitter was just hiding something rotten underneath? Let's dig in and uncover the secret at the very heart of Solomon's kingdom.
Our main source for this explainer, Dr. John Oswalt, uses this phrase, and it is just perfect. It completely captures the story of Solomon's reign. On the outside, you have this beautiful, flawless apple, but on the inside, a secret decay had already started to set in.
So to really see that worm, first we've got to appreciate the apple. And Solomon's world was, by every single account, a picture of absolute success. His reign brought an era of peace and prosperity that was totally unheard of for Israel.
I mean, the success was just astonishingly complete. There was peace on every single border, the population was booming, the average person felt safe, they felt prosperous, and they were happy. Solomon controlled the major trade routes of the ancient world, all the way from modern-day Iraq down to Egypt, and he became fabulously wealthy.
So, how in the world did he do it? How did he manage this huge empire? Well, this is where we see his famous wisdom in action. And I'm not just talking about clever judgments. I'm talking about building a massive, complex government to run the whole show.
Yeah, this is where you really see his gift for administration. Solomon took the government he inherited from his father, David, and he just dramatically expanded it, creating this really sophisticated bureaucracy to manage his growing empire.
Okay, check out this table. It shows the change so clearly. You can see how the royal cabinet grew from his dad David's early reign to his later years, and then it just explodes under Solomon. Look at those new positions. Someone in charge of tax officers, a palace administrator, who was maybe like a prime minister. It just got way more complex. And that's wisdom, right? Smart enough to know you can't do it all yourself.
But look a little closer. See that last row? That position, in charge of forced labor, was a pretty troubling thing his father David added late in his reign. But under Solomon, it wasn't some temporary thing. Nope. It became a permanent part of the government machine. And this, right here, is our first real hint of that worm in the apple.
Because all of this, the massive palace, the happy people, the peace on all sides, all of it came at a cost. And the way Solomon chose to pay for it started to create these deep, deep cracks in the foundation of his kingdom.
So what was the cost? Well, for starters, a 1/12 tax. Every district in Israel had to supply the gigantic royal household for one full month out of the year. Basically, that's a tax of 1/12 of your income. Imagine giving up a full month's pay every year.
And this is where Solomon's political wisdom gets a little darker. He literally redrew the map, creating 12 brand new administrative districts. And he was very careful to carve up the old, powerful northern tribes like Ephraim and Manasseh to break up their traditional bases of power. Super shrewd move to consolidate his own power.
Now the text says he placed this burden on all Israel. But whenever you see that phrase, you have to ask yourself a question. Who's not included in all Israel?
Judah, his own tribe. The king's tribe was exempt from this national tax. Now, it might have seemed like a smart political move at the time, keep your home base happy, but it was just blatant favoritism. And this is the first clear moment where you see a conflict between what's politically smart and what's morally right. It sowed seeds of resentment that would literally eventually tear the kingdom in two. Okay, now let's turn to Solomon's most famous project of all, the Great Temple. It was supposed to be a house for God, but the price for building it? Well, it involved forbidden deals and a staggering human cost. So to get this deal, you have to understand this term, cutting a covenant. This was not just a friendly agreement, it was a blood pact, a sacred treaty where both sides basically recognized the gods of their partner. For an Israelite, this was absolutely forbidden.
And yet, to get those priceless cedars of Lebanon for the temple walls, that's exactly what Solomon did. He cut a covenant with Hiram, the king of Tyre. Think about that. In order to build a house for his God, he made a pact that compromised his people's exclusive commitment to that God.
And the human cost was just immense. It started with a levy of 30,000 men. These were conscripted laborers from all Israel, which, again, probably didn't include his own tribe. They were sent in shifts to the forests of Lebanon to chop down trees.
But that was just the start. On top of the loggers, Solomon conscripted 70,000 more men to serve as carriers, hauling these massive logs and stones. And then finally, another 80,000 men were forced to work as stone cutters, quarrying rock out of the hills.
That is a workforce of over 150,000 men, all conscripted to build the king's projects.
So the crucial point here, think about the irony. Just think about it. The defining story of Israel is God liberating them from slavery in Egypt, where they were forced to make bricks for Pharaoh. And now, to build a house for that very same God, Solomon puts them right back into state-sponsored forced labor. They're back in slavery.
And you know what's wild? The prophet Samuel had warned the people this would happen years earlier. He told them exactly what would happen if they demanded a king. He said the king will take your sons, your daughters, your fields, and in the end, you will be his slaves. Solomon became the very king they were warned against.
So this whole thing really comes down to a conflict between two very different kinds of wisdom. And this conflict is what ultimately defines Solomon's incredibly complicated legacy.
On the one hand, you have earthly wisdom. This is pragmatic, intellectual skill. It's about knowing what works to get things done, to build an empire. And Solomon had this in spades. But then there's another kind of wisdom. Let's call it heavenly wisdom. This is about knowing what is right. It requires humility, moral integrity, a fear of the Lord. The tragedy of Solomon is that his brilliant earthly wisdom slowly but surely choked out his heavenly wisdom.
And that leaves us with this one last question. With all the compromises, all the forced labor, all the self-aggrandizement, you really have to wonder, was this great temple project truly about building up the name of God, or was it about building up the glorious name of Solomon?